Now, the next speaker we've got for you is Jason Morrissey. His app was Alien Blue, and for me, this is one of the weirder apps to talk about today because I actually downloaded this app before I had a Reddit account. I always kind of thought that Reddit was like a nerdier space on the internet that was just too nerdy for me. But when I actually started seeing this on my girlfriend had this on her iPad, and I started playing with it all the time, and it was so beautifully laid out. And if you've ever been to Reddit, that is an ugly site, and his app really just kind of brought it all into line and made it such a beautiful, usable experience. So it's actually moved from a service I never used into the front page of my iPad. So I think that's pretty amazing. So, and yes, he did actually want me to say that he was quite pretty, but I'll get Jason up on stage. Thanks, guys.
Hello, how you doing? I'm rocking a pink iPad. Now, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to do a little bit more reading than I'd usually like to do, but there's a lot I want to get through, so I don't want to miss any of it because I'm nervous.
Jason, sorry.
Yeah, man.
I should say I'm a short ass, so everyone adjust the microphone after I've spoke.
All right, up here. How's that? Is that better? Can you hear me? All right. I'll use this. I've got gastric flu, by the way. So, if you hear my stomach making any noises, you're probably going to get your money's worth. So, I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different today than some of the other speakers. I'm probably not the best qualified to tell you how to make lots of money on the App Store because I personally don't. But there's one thing I know how to do, and that's to have fun. And in fact, that's how I started everything. So, it's something I really feel strongly about, and I found that the pursuit of fun has it's led me to live a more fulfilling life, and to some degree, it's allowed me to earn a living doing all the things I love doing. So, I'm obsessed with all things engineering. My particular flavor of engineering is software. I love creating games and applications, and but when I get a chance, I also like creating electronics, which I'll kind of show you some of that stuff in a minute. So that's Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Much like him, I've made creating things and exploring things that I like a key focus of my life, but more so on a one-dimensional scale. And this is where it all started for me. That was my first computer, and my mother had bought it for us just to play games. I had no interest in programming at that time. I didn't even know. I mean, I was 9 years old. And the thing is that my brother and we got sick of playing Donkey Kong after about a couple of months, and I found this in the box, and it's the user manual for Commodore 64, and in it I found this piece of code, and I remember it, and I actually had to dig this up. It's the first program I've ever typed up into the computer, and it's something I found in, I don't know, page 30 or something of the manual, and I was just curious. I was getting bored, so I typed it up, and it made a ball bounce around the screen. And many of you are probably engineers, so it's really a difficult experience to explain to someone who isn't an engineer. But to be able to make computers do stuff, it kind of invokes this amazing excitement in you as an engineer. And 6 years ago, I decided to allow myself the freedom to indulge in that experience over and over again. So some people consider Alien Blue to be an App Store success, and I agree it is as well. But I think my definition of App Store success is a little bit different. It's usually described in some function of income or number of downloads, but that wasn't really my expectation going in. All I really wanted to do was to create something cool and then share it with other people. So for me, it was just an opportunity to create. And going in with that expectation, I couldn't really be disappointed. Even if money didn't follow, which it usually doesn't, I'd still get something out of it. So yeah, it was a success. It was a success in that, from the day I released it and all the times up to it, I had a lot of fun building it. And that's what I really want to kind of express to you today. It's all about the fun. Now, to stay in love with programming, I decided to stay the fuck away from these things. I was told I'm allowed to swear. Get an R rating on the YouTube video. So I didn't do any of this nonsense, or in my opinion, nonsense. There are people who might agree that these things are crucial to having a good product and longevity of income and all those things. But that, as far as I'm concerned, that was like bringing water to a sandcastle. It's a creative endeavor, and these things have a way of sucking out the enjoyment, I think, of programming and engineering in general. I know that personally. Was that me? It was me. I know that personally, any of these things could have dissuaded me from doing the things I love, and even worse, they could have encouraged me to pursue boring things that I wouldn't have liked, just simply because there's a gap in the market. And also I made a little note here actually about Tweetbot. Tweetbot, I don't know if you guys use it. It's a Twitter client. It's one of the latecomers, and it's the one I use. And sometimes when I'm using it, and I think, this wasn't released not long ago, in a saturated market, and I kind of think about these things, and I think that it would have been a real shame if the developers of Tweetbot decided not to go ahead with it and not develop it just as a result of it not meeting certain criteria, because it would have been a huge risk for them. So, my expectations from the App Store was just to have fun. Was just to create something that I felt was awesome and then to share it with other people. I didn't expect to make lots of money on it. And in fact, if I had gone into it thinking I'm going to be rich and I'm going to make lots of money and I'll quit my job and all these things, I don't think I would have had the energy to sustain the development. It's a lot of hard work, and unless you are really in it to enjoy yourself as an engineer, I think it's grueling work. And in addition, I think that had I gone into it with just a focus of money and retiring in mind, I would have made really poor decisions for my users. And I've been lucky not to do those things because I just wanted to have fun. So, profit or enjoyment. Now, if you can achieve both, fantastic. Given the option of these two, I usually try to focus on things that give me that childlike feeling of creating, the same I had when I first started programming in my Commodore 64 and got into game programming at an early age. That's the kind of feeling I want. I want enjoyment over profit. It's a cliche, but I really do feel that the journey is the reward. I'm never disappointed if money doesn't follow, because in my case it usually doesn't. So, and by the way, I'll just apologise. Compared to some of the other talks, mine's a little bit introspective. I'm talking more about myself than the App Store, but it's something I really do feel strongly about. So 6 years ago, I was a full-time employee. I was working as a Java consultant, and I was creating mainly invoicing applications for companies. I actually really did like my job, but I was always yearning for something a little bit more exciting. I'm a creative individual at heart, and I really wanted to do things that would kind of, expose the more creative parts of me. So sometimes I also felt like I was working a lot more, but engineering less, and that was a shame. So I was in pursuit of something fun. I always felt like software was an art, but I began to worry that if I follow the path that I was on, making invoicing systems just for money, that I'd eventually fall out of love with it. And that would have been a shame because I love it so much. And so LIS wasn't around back then. It was 6 years ago. And if it was around, I probably would have stuck around there. So it wasn't around, so I had to find other ways to enjoy myself. So back then I had a difficult choice to make. I could do the things that I wanted to do on the side, or I could switch things up and work on the side. So I'd then be focusing my primary time and energy on exploring fun projects. Now, at the time, I was used to having the income of a pretty highly paid developer. I'd say I was in the top 10 percentile of what people made in my industry. So I was accustomed to a lot of the luxury and the safety that came with that income, especially for my family. So I had to find a way to transition in a way that wouldn't disrupt things too much. And here's the road that I took. So I went from a permanent role to long-term contracts, and then from long-term contracts to short-term contracts. and then eventually to freelance and part-time. Now, I have gone back up that scale a few times over the past couple of years, just to make ends meet. But that's generally the process I took, and each step exposed me to a little bit more risk. So I became a little bit more comfortable having to save and not always have a regular income. So I'd occasionally take on gigs, sometimes as an employee, other times as a freelancer. But I'm the sole income earner for my family, by the way. So to keep us afloat, I had to put all of the income from my contract work into savings. I cut all unnecessary expenditures, no eating out, gym memberships, or takeaway coffees during that time, which if any one of you knows me, it was hell. And then I spent every waking moment creating things and working. So without actually the work aspect of it, it would have just been just bludgeoning. So with that came a few sacrifices. The first sacrifice was sleep. In an effort to pack as much awesome time creating stuff, I cut my sleep down to 4 to 6 hours per day. And when I was contracting or working as an employee during that time, I'd sleep about 2 to 4 hours a day. So and that's about the time I've kind of gotten used to the 2 to 4 hours a day sleep cycle. It allows me to pack a lot more work in. Unfortunately, as a result of that, my health did take a kick. And also during very long development sessions, I developed a crook back. And it wouldn't be rare for me to hallucinate as well during those periods. It was okay. It's what happens without coffee, you hallucinate. No house, no home ownership, which is a shame because, it's something that my wife and I would love to have, but, we rent, and we rent to this day. And it's a sacrifice that we made because it gives us more flexibility. And mentally, it's easier to downgrade to a cheaper rental than it is to sell your house because you need money. No holiday in the last 6 years, not including a honeymoon for my wife. So I do owe her big time for that. Mind you, you don't have to obviously make these kinds of sacrifices. I was pretty hardcore. No fancy cars. The only car we had in our family is the one that my wife was driving long before we met. I cycle everywhere to save money. And the biggest hit, I think, was to my social life. I'd often go 6 months to a year without seeing a single friend. I'd be invited to a lot of things and I'd have to decline because I'm so busy. And I got to admit, it really sucked. If any of you are actually thinking of going independent, I'd really encourage you to co-work with people and to maybe find a way to integrate that social aspect into your working life. I wish I had done that years ago. I'm still trying to mend a lot of the friendships now. So as to whether or not it was worth it, it's a tough one to answer. My wife would probably say it wasn't because it was too much sacrifice. It doesn't have to be that way for everyone, obviously. But I did find that though, taking on more rewarding projects, it was a really good experience. So is having a nice solid income. And without having both of those things, I think it's still really tough to decide on whether the journey is worth it for you. Now, as a result of working on fun projects, I discovered so many things about myself that I enjoyed. And because I had a little bit more time, I really let myself explore and study those things. The first thing I found is that I really love sketching, despite not being great at it. I'd sketch all the time, and I still sketch to this day when I'm not programming. And one of the byproducts of sketching I found is that when you have no money to afford birthday presents, it's really nice to just be able to give someone a hand-drawn picture of them. Now, I also found that from sketching, I discovered that I like oil painting as well. And over time, even though I was quite a technical person, I became more and more interested in art and design. I really, at that time, I had no idea that I enjoy it so much. And now I'm kind of addicted to this stuff, I'm kind of jealous of all the graphic designers. I then combined my love of sketching with programming to kind of return to my childhood dreams of making games. So what I'd do is I'd sketch a lot of vector artwork and to try to kind of test drive my 2D platform engines. So here I built a software engine that could take an Adobe Illustrator file and generate box 2D levels for my games. And here's one of the games in action. So some of you may have seen it if you've worked with me in the past, that I sometimes like to show it. It's a feeling of pride because it never was released. And as a result of having a little bit more time and allowing myself to explore this kind of creativity, I also got a chance to learn how to use animation tools like Toon Boom. I also got a chance to learn how to do 3D modeling, which is, these are skills I guess I would never have been exposed to as a Java developer. I also got really into electronics during this time. So here, in this example, I hooked up my exercise bike to an Arduino board, which would then feed my cycling speed into computer games. Now, this is something that's been around for a while, but I wanted to do it myself. I was inspired by something I read on Reddit, mind you. So here I'd have an Arduino board, it'd feed my speed into, my exercise bike would feed my speed into this board, and then I'd have an N64 emulator running in my Mac, and I created a Mac application that would translate my cycling speed and inject that speed into games. So in this example, I use a wireless Wiimote to steer and my legs to pedal and a sweaty, furious Mario Kart action. So that stuff was, geeky, and it was fun as hell, and it was sometimes just difficult to describe to my wife for why I was doing these things. It was also a really stressful time though. Because money was short, and suitable short-term contracts weren't always abundant. And so what I found is that I developed insomnia. Despite having very little sleep, I'd find it sometimes difficult to just get that because I'd be stressed out so often. And reading Reddit actually got me through a lot of those sleepless nights. Over the years, I developed an affinity for the community. They would help me fall asleep every night. And as is my nature to combine software with the things I love, I made this. It's a Reddit client for iOS. It was my first independent work outside of contracts and digital agencies. And it was so much fun. I'd jump out of bed early in the morning and I'd work 16 to 18 hours straight. In fact, I'd eat nothing but peanut butter just because I didn't want to leave it. I didn't want to leave it for a second. I just couldn't put it down. And what made it so awesome was that it allowed me to explore things on my own. I didn't have to adhere to a strict process. I didn't have to do any cost-benefit analysis or any of that garbage. It was just fun and code. I just took what was up here and I put it there. And it was awesome. And it's all for fun. In fact, everything I've done in the last 6 years was a labor of love. It was all developed for my enjoyment of software. And it really instilled this attitude in me that software should be a fun and explorative process. And I was able to bring this attitude back to a lot of my contracting and permanent roles too. Now, most of you are here because you want to, obviously do some stuff with iOS. So I'll just describe some of the things that I learned with iOS, especially as a person who's worked in enterprise projects, small projects, and my own independent work. I can let you know what it's like to do independent work as a contrast. First and foremost, I find that iOS is a great way to scratch that engineering itch. The tools are incredible, and the possibilities are endless. You've got Apple as well, who's got a very innovative company that's driving the platform. So if you even start to get bored, every few months is, a stream of new features just around the corner. So it's an exciting time to be a developer in general, but I think it's even more exciting to be an iOS developer. Now, apathy. This is a weird one because what I found is that doing what I loved doing and for the fun of it made me somewhat apathetic to things like piracy. I didn't care. It didn't bother me that people would pirate it or would try to get it for free. And in fact, I didn't even check things like download statistics. I'd only check these things if someone asked me what the stats were like, then I'd go and look it up. And I really didn't care about competition either because I never went into this kind of trying to make money and to try to establish a market or any of that rubbish. I just went into this to have some fun. So I was kind of apathetic to these things. And I found that these are just distractions for me. And, making Reddit apps, it's already distracting enough. So here's a couple of the things that I did do right. I kept the process very lean. I didn't have any strict rules or organization or anything like that. And for me, it was all about just sitting down and enjoying myself. And I didn't want to let any kind of strict, adherence to agile or anything like that get in the way of that. And that allowed me to be a little bit more spontaneous and respond quickly when things broke. I didn't have any kind of complicated build systems or automation tests or anything like that. And the funny thing is that my users don't really care about that stuff, so I gave myself the same liberty. I just focused on the things that were the most enjoyable and useful for my users. Now, the other thing that I did right was that I was very careful to respect licenses and trademarks. When Alien Blue first landed on the App Store, it wasn't immediately noticeable that it was a Reddit client. It wasn't called Reddit for iOS, and it didn't have the Reddit logo on it. And the reason was obviously that those things were trademark terms, and it's a trademarked logo. So I wanted to be really careful in respecting their licensing, because the Reddit administrators they're very nice people, and they've never really gone after people for doing things like that. But I didn't even want them to think about it. So I kind of just put up with having very limited visibility on the App Store. It was really difficult for people to find my application. But it also really strengthened my relationship with the folks who run Reddit. They knew I had the community's best interest at heart, and a few months afterwards, they granted me permission to use their logo and name. And it's funny because I've seen multiple instances of developers that they don't respect content or IP licenses, and then they complain publicly when their applications get pulled down. I find that asking for permission and keeping an open dialogue has always been the best way. The other thing I did right was to make updates exciting and substantial. For example, here's what an Alien Blue update looks like. That logo's changed, by the way. It's huge. The updates are usually incredibly verbose, and I could just kind of keep updates simple. There's really not much I need to do all the time. I could just write bug fixes and small improvements. But what I've found though is that updates should be an exciting thing, not just for my users but for me as well. So I really take the time to do those things properly, and I try to take pride in all the little things that I've fixed. Even if it's a tiny improvement, I'll write it down. And I genuinely care about users. That's the other thing. In fact, like on my phone, I use the free version of Alien Blue, and despite there being a paid version, I only use the paid version of Alien Blue when I'm preparing an update. And the reason I use the free version is that I want to make sure that the user experience is enjoyable, even if the user doesn't support the application, because I just want them to have fun using something I've created. That's all it's about for me. So I don't annoy or frustrate or guilt users into using paid versions of the applications, and it's always been my attitude that if I make it awesome and fun enough, they'll probably drop some funds my way anyway, and I found that that's actually worked for me. I also put a lot of care and preparation into the updates. Back in the day when I only had 50 to 500 users, I'd still test the updates to death, trying to make sure I don't screw something up. I always end up screwing something up, but I found that whether or not I've had 50 users or 200,000, I'd still I still put the same amount, because the way I look at it is those users have made a commitment to purchase my application or to support it just by downloading it, and so I want to reciprocate by making it as best as possible within my capability. So it wasn't all rosy. Here are some of the things that I did wrong. I made a typical engineer's mistake when I launched the product. I put too much focus on features and not enough focus on polish. In fact, I really think it would have been a far better product had I limited the feature set from the start and just polished it to a T. And then I could always introduce features later on, after I've established a nice character in the UI. And I find that in an application I've been using recently that I think has done this right is Verbs. Here, this is Verbs. It's a Gtor client. I was looking for a nice iPhone Gtor client, even though I just can't seem to type on the keyboard. And out of all the ones that I tried, Verbs had the least number of supported services and had the least feature set. It was a very limited feature set. But using it, they polished it to perfection. Everything from the account setup to the about screen is flawless. And I don't know, this is where I'm trying to now direct Alien Blue towards a really polished, high-quality UI. And I think if you're just starting out, I'd really recommend you try to keep back your techie engineer and just limit your feature set, and then try just to polish what you've got before you introduce more features. The other big mistake I made was that Alien Blue was a separate product to Alien Blue for iPad. It wasn't a universal application. And now transitioning back is really hard to do, especially because there's two different pricing models. And the biggest, I guess, the most frequent email I receive is, I've just bought this version of your application. Do I need to buy this one too? And it's really tough because you have to answer yes, especially in a market where people are used to saying no. It's a universal binary, right? It really, they did take the same amount of time to develop. Alien Blue for iPad, it was a very different product to Alien Blue for iPhone, but universal applications are something that my users want, and that's where I'd like to be as well. So if you're just starting out, I'd really recommend you go universal. Otherwise, you'll be in the same situation I'm in right now, which is having to disappoint your users by telling them they have to buy 2 products. So I want to make a case against developing things for money on the App Store. Monetizing is important, and you have to eat, okay? And it's required to sustain you if you're not earning income from other sources. And believe me, there's no one who understands that better than I do. But look, the reality is that making lots of money from the App Store, the odds are heavily stacked against you. I mean, there's 11 of us speaking today, of which I'm probably making the least amount. So if that's anything to go by, I reckon you should just do this stuff for fun. And then if money follows, so be it. So I really want to make a strong case as to why having dollars in your eyes and going to the App Store trying to make money is a bad idea. First and foremost, I mean, you guys are all aware of this, right? Prices are circling the drain. And no matter what you create, a competitor will come out. They'll make something at slightly lower cost. Now, I remember actually those of you who have talked to me about this probably heard this a million times, but I do remember when I was a kid that $5 games were called donationware. I don't know if you guys can remember that time. So you pay $5 for a game, and that was considered to be a donation because it was so cheap. And now that same price is Rolls Royce on the App Store. That's kind of scary because especially if your livelihood depends on it. This is no surprise. Unpaid updates and support. I get anywhere between 50 to 100 emails a day, and I have to respond to those. Yeah, it's a lot. And what's funny about this is that I've seen some developers try to go around this by trying to create a new application with this is my 2.0 version, and I found that that's never worked well. That's never done well for the developer's reputation. It's a really bad idea. So you guys have to get used to the fact that you make an application, and when a user spends $1 on it, that's $1 for life for you. Strong push to universal. However long it takes you to make an application and an iPad version, halve your income per hour by basically you're dividing it by 2. So you're building 2 apps for the price of 1, and and that's just what users expect. So very high user expectations. So if you create an application and you price it at $2, you can't just get away by thinking, it's a $2 app, right? It doesn't work that way on the App Store because $2 gets you a lot of quality usually on the App Store. And especially when you've got publishers who are also pricing their applications and games at a very low cost. And you've got Apple releasing applications like GarageBand for $5. Users are becoming increasingly more pedantic about what they get for their money, and that's fair enough. That's just the way the market is. Now this is something I do feel a little bit strongly about. It's polluting the market. In an effort to make money, I've seen developers just push garbage to the App Store, and it really hurts me to see that. And I'm being a little bit judgmental here because who am I to judge what's garbage, right? But I don't know. I judge it by an application that doesn't go past 1.0. That's usually my yardstick for it. And it just lets me think that it kind of leads me to think that the developers are clearly making apps that they have no interest in making just to make a quick dollar. And it shits me because you don't tip, and you make a tip calculator, right? No one needs that. It's just garbage. I don't know. I find that it's bad for the users because it pollutes the market that they're trying to search in. It's bad for developers like me who actually spend time caring about users, trying to create something awesome. And I think it's actually bad for the developers that do that as well because ultimately it's going to affect their reputation. I've always kind of had this mentality that you're better off just perfecting your aim with one product first rather than just throwing random darts at a dartboard hoping to hit a bullseye. And I kind of just want to flog a dead horse a little bit more about making lots of cash on the App Store as your primary purpose. Let's assume that you actually did manage to do this. Let's say you created an application that you have no interest in creating and you did it just for money. And let's say you started making money on it. You identified a gap in the market and all that shit. And, you targeted the right consumer demographic, right? Well, then you're stuck, right? Because your users have started paying for it now. So you have an obligation to support. You have to make this better. And if you think that, that's all right, I'm sick of it and I'll just let it die. This doesn't work that way. It's like a commitment for life with the App Store. These users are used to getting updates from every single application for free. If you don't push out updates, those 1-star reviews are going to start piling on after a while. If you don't keep up to date with the latest iOS stuff that breaks your applications, you're going to start collecting those 1-star reviews, and that's going to destroy your reputation. And in this particular industry, your reputation is everything. Alex spoke earlier about opening opportunities as a result of creating cool apps, being able to get contract work. And I'm in the same boat. I get a lot of contract work through Alien Blue because people see it and they want me to work on their products. And can you imagine what would happen if Alien Blue was a 1-star rated app? How will I showcase my skills as a 1-star rated app developer? I think it's really risky. I don't think you should create shitty apps, especially just to make cash. And I do want to make it clear, because I'm being a bit of a downer about that, but there's nothing wrong with trying to earn a living. But I just think that profit, especially in the App Store, should be a byproduct of creating something you love, and profit shouldn't be the sole driver. It's especially true if you're an independent developer, because it's just you, right? Everything just comes down to you, and so does your reputation. It's all on the line. And the other thing is that I really do feel that you're going to miss out on a big part of the experience if you pull the plug on projects too early because they're not making you money, or you pursue uninteresting but what you consider to be profitable work. I think you miss out on a huge part of it. Just create what you love, and I think you'll be happier that you did. People throw this word around at me a lot. I've noticed for the last 6 years I've been hearing this shit, opportunity cost, right? And just directing me to always do the most profitable thing at every opportunity. And it shits me. My response is that there's a cost of not doing the things that you love as well. You're alive for what, another 40 more years. You're creating boring things to make lots of money. I don't know. I find that engineering is a gift, and it lets you create something where there was once nothing. And I hate to see it perverted for money, and especially when there's so much fun to be had doing what we do. We're so lucky that we're kind of born with this drive to make cool stuff. It's amazing to me, So, in contrast to what it was like being a J2E developer, I find that iOS is so much more fun, because what you can do with it really pushes you creatively as well. Since I've fallen in love with Objective-C, I've taken lots of roles in different companies. Sometimes the projects are too damn awesome, right, to not take on. And I really do. I know the message today is about kind of becoming an independent developer, but I really do feel strongly that sometimes chasing fun means finding the right contract role or the right employer as well. It's not all about independent. You can do a bit of both. Just do fun stuff. There's so much work out there. It's awesome that we're engineers and we make cool shit, and we've got a right to enjoy the process. And and I still work really hard to support my family. But no, I'm really glad that I chased fun rather than money. And so I'm not feeling too crash hot today, but I really fought just to come in here and just kind of share this with you, because I remember when I first wanted to do something different, when I was kind of earning a fortune doing invoicing systems, and I wanted to leave. And I remember the only advice I'd receive from people is that just do it. You're making money. Everyone hates their job, and you'll make lots of money and retire early, right? That's the advice I was given, and no one really supported my decision just to leave that and kind of pursue stuff just for fun of it. And that's why I wanted to come in here today, because the only person that supported me was my wife. Even when we had no money at all, she'd still tell me to go and try something fun, and and just to kind of let the engineer in me blossom. And her encouragement really allowed me to live a more fulfilling life, have a bit more purpose. And I wanted to come today so I can pass along some of that encouragement to all of you today. So thank you so much for listening.
What an awesome speech. I love that. So no sleep, no health, no life, and no house. That's what you got to look forward to. We're actually speaking this morning. Jason said, I said, do you know if you're allowed to swear on the podium today? And Jason immediately said, yeah, fuck yeah, I checked. So clearly, yes, he's a passionate man, but that was great.